Let's talk about improving your fantasy team heading into week 14 of the fantasy football season. Do me a favor, smash that like button, show some love. Subscribe if you like our content. We are going to go position by position. All right, we did this last week. You guys liked it. So we're going to go running back first and wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback. And there are time codes below. Depending on what position you're looking for, you can use those time codes. Starting off with running backs. Well, Sunday Night Football brought a lot of interest, a lot of intrigue to the waiver wire. And that is in the form of Jordan Mason. Christian McCaffrey did leave this game with an injury. You know, at the time, I can't really tell you exactly what the injury is, but according to a couple, doctors over on the Twitterverse, a lot of people think this was the play where he injured his knee. It wasn't actually the play where he just kind of fell down. So they think it was the play before that where he landed awkwardly on his knee. Could be a PCL sprain. That's the concern. We don't know exactly what the issue is right now. We know it's a knee injury, but the point is Jordan Mason is instantly going to be the number one pickup on waiver wires, point blank, period. On Sleeper alone, he's available in 38% of leagues. On ESPN and Yahoo, he's probably available in a similar amount of leagues as well. And we've already seen him be the RB1 for the San Francisco 49ers and be very good for fantasy football. Guys, remember the first 4 weeks, right? Being the guy for San Francisco, averaging over 20 carries per game. Multiple games over 100. In fact, 3 out of his 4 games over 100 rushing yards. We have multiple games over 22 fantasy points. He has been so good, I guess in relief of Christian McCaffrey. So if you're out there and you need an RB2, whatever fab you have left, blow it on Jordan Mason, assuming he's going to be the starter for a couple weeks, maybe into the playoffs even. And if you have Christian McCaffrey, definitely prioritize getting Jordan Mason because there's a very realistic chance that Christian McCaffrey does not play into the fantasy playoffs. We don't know that yet, but I mean, who knows how long the injury could be? I mean, he might be back next week, but he might also miss multiple weeks. And at this point, Jordan Mason is the most valuable name on the waiver wire, point blank, period. And that brings me to number 2. Number 2 is secure your handcuffs. All right, it's not a name, it's just a ideology. All right, at this point of the fantasy football season, week 14, if you're watching this video, it's probably because you have a chance to make the playoffs. And if you get into the playoffs, let's be honest, your handcuffs are more valuable, they are, than some random name on the waiver wire. Okay, so if you're out there and you have Derrick Henry, make sure you get Justice Hill, right? We just talked about Jordan Mason. Well, he was a handcuff to CMC. Who is your RB1? Well, make sure you have handcuffed the guy directly behind him, right? For example, if Bijan Robinson's your running back 1, make sure you got Tyler Algier. If you're relying on Kyron Williams, make sure you're rostering Blake Corum, right? If you're relying on James Conner, make sure Trey Benson is rostered. I don't care what your running back 1 is, but make sure you have handcuffed the guy because at the end of the day, you don't want your opponent in the playoffs to beat you to the handcuff if there is an injury to your RB1. I mean, I did that back in 2017, I believe it was. I beat one of my friends in a home league because I picked up Justin Jackson when Austin Eckler went down with an injury, and we won a fantasy championship with his handcuff. All right, number 3, let's talk about Sincere McCormick. Now, if you don't know Sincere McCormick, he's out of UTSA, undrafted free agent, kind of been around the league, but he was the running back who kind of shined the most for Las Vegas versus the Chiefs on Black Friday. You can see he was outsnapped by Amir Abdullah, 42 to 26 snaps, but in total carries, he had more. He had 12 carries compared to 10 for Amir Abdullah, and this team has been looking for someone to make an impact. I mean, we can have a look at the splits, the usage here. You can see Sincere in that darker blue. Again, split early downs entirely, which is where you see a lot of the rushing attempts. Was there in the 2-minute drill, short yardage scenarios, they used him as well. And the better news is he was actually effective. He averaged over 5 yards per carry against the Chiefs defense. Guys, the Raiders have been wanting, begging, asking anybody to step up, and Sincere McCormick is the only one who's been able to do it this year. So he could be a legit starter moving forward. We'll give him a week to sit on our benches, but coaches love him. They say they're going to give him more opportunities. He's definitely worth picking up. All right, the next name we're going to talk about here is Kamani Vidal. With the injury, to J.K. Dobbins, he's going to be out for, multiple weeks now. Kamani Vidal has a chance to improve his role over the course of time. In this game, he had 4 carries for 20 yards. More importantly, averaged 5 yards per carry, which if he's going to continue to be efficient, they are going to give him opportunity to win this job, right? Gus Edwards, he was efficient this week, but he hasn't been efficient this entire season. The first 4 weeks of the year, Gus Edwards was averaging under 3 yards per carry, so there's a good chance that Kamani Vidal could improve his opportunities. Tank Bigsby, look, the reality with Tank Bigsby is he and Travis Etienne are kind of splitting time, but they could kind of go towards Tank Bigsby towards the end of the year. Also, the Washington Commanders backfield with no Austin Eckler, who's on IR. We're going to see a split between Brian Robinson, but after him, Chris Rodriguez and Jeremy McNichols are going to get opportunities. I'm a little bit hesitant on Chris Rodriguez because they were up the majority of this game. They really didn't need to throw the ball. And that gave guys like Chris Rodriguez an opportunity to get more carries that might not be there in a neutral game script. All right, moving on to the wide receiver position. Let's talk about Adam Thielen first off. What a game for Adam Thielen, looking like the prime version of himself. He came out here, had 10 targets, caught 8 of them for 99 yards in a tud against the Tampa Bay Bucks, and looked like the true alpha number 1 wide receiver. It was flashbacks back to 2023. Remember when Adam Thielen was a reliable wide receiver too, week in, week out with Bryce Young? Well, guess who's back? Adam Thielen is who's back, and he looks like the most reliable receiver, and Bryce Young is playing better. Bryce Young is playing his best football in the NFL, so Adam Thielen is an absolute must roster. I mean, Jordan Mason's number 1 if CMC has a long-term injury, and right behind him, Adam Thielen is number 2. All right, another guy who stepped up this week, Parker Washington, caught 6 out of 12 targets, 103 yards, and a touchdown. We love to see that. Now, Trevor Lawrence dealing with an injury of his own, but Mac Jones, there was some chemistry between Parker Washington and Mac Jones. These guys both had some work on the second team, so it's not a surprise that they already have that inbuilt chemistry. Parker Washington in deeper formats could be a flexible name for sure. Devon Vele has not played this week. By the time of recording this video, he does play on Monday Night Football, but if he is out there, he's only rostered in 40% of sleeper leagues. If he's out there, definitely go pick him up. Last week, he had 14 points, 9 targets, 6 catches, and 80 yards. He's had 3 games in a row over 10 PPR points. Definitely a name that should be rostered, especially attached to an ascending name like Bo Nix. You never know what that chemistry is going to get to. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Guys, we are talking about a player who has scored 8 touchdowns in his last 7 games. 8 touchdowns in his last 7 games. Since they moved on from DeAndre Hopkins, he's been a startable name each and every week. This week over 21 PPR points. The issue is he doesn't have any targets outside of these deep touchdown opportunities. So he is a little bit of like the MVS. He's a little bit of the Rashid Shaheed type player. But 8 touchdowns in the last 7 games, we can't just laugh at that at this point, right? So if you're in deeper formats, he's definitely a name that you can pick up. After that, let's talk about MVS himself, who has had a touchdown in 3 out of the last 3 games, so every game, and he has had 4 total touchdowns in the last 3 games. So another in deeper formats, another guy that you can put out there. Derek Carr loves throwing that deep ball. We'll talk about Michael Wilson next, who, has had some pretty decent games recently. 7 targets in this one, 5 catches for 55 yards. Again, in deeper formats, you would think about these names. But guys like Kayshon Boutte, Brandon Cooks, Calvin Austin, these are only names that you pick up in deep formats. All right, at the tight end position, let's talk about Jonnu Smith. If he is still somehow out there, he's got to be the number 1 priority. Averaging about 10 targets per game in the last 3 weeks, averaging over 20 points per game pretty easily in the last 3 weeks. He has been so good. It's been honestly kind of surprising to watch the way this offense functions in Miami. But if you look at the targets, even this week, let's say on Thanksgiving, for example. Well, on Thanksgiving, he had 11 targets, Tyreek had 8, Jalen Waddle had 4. And this is how we've been seeing this offense outworked for like 4 straight weeks in a row now. So it's not some fluke. They've talked about how much Tyreek opens up the game for Jonnu Smith. So, Jonnu Smith is looking like a league winner, and if he's somehow out there, you've got to roster him. We will also talk about names like Will Disley, who has had a very good first read target rate. Now, this week he did have a goose egg, but if he gets dropped out there, in any of your leagues, he's definitely a startable name, especially next week versus Kansas City, who's one of the best matchups against tight ends. Outside of that, Zach Ertz, another name that you can pick up and flex. Now, he might be dropped because of the bye week. So again, another guy that might be dropped that you can pick up heading into the playoffs as a desperation option. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the quarterbacks. We'll go through 1 quarterback formats and then super flex. So starting off with 1 quarterback formats, we'll talk about Anthony Richardson, who did just have 23 points. Now, it was a weird game. He only completed, 12 passes. He only had 109 passing yards, right? 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. A lot of his passes were wildly inaccurate, but when they're on the goal line, he always has a chance to score a touchdown, which is what he did this week. So he has the bye week this week. And, you know, in one quarterback formats, there are worse names to start, right? Especially if you have a team, you know, a fantasy league that has a championship in week 18 versus the Jags. He'll be one of the best streamable quarterbacks. We can also talk about Caleb Williams, who's had back-to-back weeks over 26 points. He has 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in his last 2 games. Pretty decent schedule upcoming. Definitely another interesting name to keep your eye on. Also, Drake May, another guy who is going into his bye week, but has some pretty favorable matchups after that you can exploit in a one quarterback format. Now, in Superflex formats, we'll talk about Aiden O'Connell, who was very impressive versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Over 340 yards total, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, versus a good Kansas City Chiefs defense. That's very impressive. He plays Tampa Bay next week, the same Tampa Bay that Bryce Young just tore apart. So you can definitely, in Superflex formats, stream him at your quarterback 2 spot. Mac Jones, you know, look, if we see Trevor Lawrence miss an extended period of time, which I think we will because of that injury that was very nasty, I am very disappointed in Al-Shaair. Is that his name? I don't remember, but it was very disappointing to see that hit. But Mac Jones was pretty decent in relief, and they've got a game versus Tennessee who has no L'Jarius Sneed. So, you know, again, desperation, quarterback 2 in Superflex leagues, definitely a name worth watching. I would be stashing Michael Penix if you're out there in a Superflex league. Kirk Cousins just had a 4 interception game. In fact, Kirk Cousins has 6 interceptions in his last 3 games and 0 passing touchdowns. At what point, as a 6-6 team, tied right now with the Tampa Bay Bucks, do they ask the question, do we have a better chance to win with Michael Penix? Right? One of my most drafted players in Dynasty Superflex leagues. It's worth stashing him 100% in case that change is made. Tyrod Taylor, Aaron Rodgers was completely average. He completed 21 out of 39 passes. A lot of simple, silly mistakes. He looks washed. If they go to Tyrod Taylor with his rushing upside in a Superflex league, again, that is a decent option for you. And finishing off with defensive streamers for week 14. These are names that you can go pick up off the waiver wire and stream at the defensive position. Eagles versus Panthers, the Cardinals versus the Seahawks. Cardinals defense has been much better this year, guys. They've turned it around very, very well. The Saints at the Giants, the Bucks versus the Raiders, and the 49ers versus the Bears. All defenses that you can go out and stream next week. I appreciate y'all for watching the video. Do me a favor, hit that like button, show some love. Subscribe if you like the content, and we'll see you in the next video. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.